Hi, everybody. Welcome into Sports Talk Chicago. Great to see all of you here with us across our great TV and radio affiliates across Illinois and Indiana. WJOB, AM 1230, JED TV, Cities 92.9 Talk FM, ACTV, 105.5 The Ticket, and WKAN. I'm Jon Zaghloul. John Meadows is directing and producing. You can follow us all over at Sports Talk Chicago. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. 18,000 plus subscribers. Would love to have you be a part of the community there, and hit the like button on the videos that we put out as well. So much going on in Bears world. They had a big day here today, and we have a huge guest here to break everything down with us. He is a sports radio legend. He's the host of Danny Mac's Friday Tailgate on WJOB, one of our affiliates, and the host of the Danny Mac podcast. Please welcome the legend, Dan McNeil, to the program. Dan, always great to see you. How are you?
John, good to be here. Thank goodness we have plenty of news to hash through from today's news conference. Ryan and Matt, number 2, the second Ryan and Matt in charge of the Bears.
So what did you make when you heard about the news that Matt Eberflus is going to stay, but Luke Getsy is the one who gets fired?
Yeah, I thought that was as predictable as the day is long. It's like a hitting coach after a season when a team doesn't make the playoffs and it was supposed to. He's the guy who's responsible for all of it. In this case, however, Getsy probably had this coming. I thought he got smarter as the year went on, but I was unimpressed by his body of work. That did not surprise me. Eberflus retaining his job did not surprise me. And I don't think we have any clarity yet on Justin Fields. I think a lot of people drew conclusions from today's news conference. I did not. And polls also left the idea, which I find the most interesting thing that was said. He didn't dismiss the notion of drafting a quarterback and keeping Justin Fields. Wouldn't that make for an interesting August?
What do you think the Bears should do at the quarterback position now that this has already occurred?
I'd punt. I've seen enough. I think he progressed a ton. I think he's easy to root for. He's an exciting player. Justin Fields is a video game. He is incredible with the ball in his hands. He's Devin Hester, and he gets the ball in his hands a ton. But he hasn't grown enough as a passer. He hasn't put enough points on the board. One of their 2 division wins, 3 division wins. Just 2 division wins. They didn't show up on opening day. They didn't score a touchdown. And Fields is the most culpable player in the game they lost to the Lions when they were leading with 3:53 remaining. They were up by 2 scores. And he's the biggest reason they didn't win that game. So I've seen enough. I would rather see them go in another direction at quarterback.
So how would that work, though, too? Because if they go with another quarterback, you got Matt Eberflus staying, presumably a new offensive coordinator and an offensive staff. What if it doesn't work out, then Matt Eberflus is fired? Then we're back in 2021, where it was kind of a lame duck situation with Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, and Justin Fields.
I think, that's going to be the interesting thing to see what they decide to do with the quarterback, because if you change, you are resetting, and you're also potentially turning off high-level candidates down the road if you don't draft the player he most wants to work with. And I was surprised that Poles was so dismissive today of Jim Harbaugh. I thought that was going to play out a little bit longer, but when he said he has not talked to Jim Harbaugh, I was surprised by that, and it doesn't appear that there's any plan to talk to the former Bears quarterback. I'd get him if I could. I don't know if he's the answer, but I don't like what I've seen from Matt Eberflus in 2 seasons.
I don't know if you could explain this to me, but what do you think Ryan Poles sees in Matt Eberflus so much to the point that he wouldn't even contact Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah, I think he's very protective of the vibe in that locker room, and maybe he'll grow into not being so protective of it. And he hinted with that about some other topics today, growing into a comfort level. We got to all remember, he's only a second-year general manager. This will be his 3rd draft coming up. He pointed several times to the team having resolve during the season and not giving up. And those things are true. They had a terrible start, and then they won 7 games in their back 13. They were better than they were bad. But who did they really beat? They beat the Commanders. They beat the Raiders when the Raiders were still being coached by Josh McDaniels, and they didn't show up that day. They played the Vikings twice without Justin Jefferson. Yes, the defense. Oh, and not to mention they beat Carolina too. Let's put that feather in their cap. But there was improvement. I think there's reasons to be encouraged by how far they've come defensively. It all seemed to change when Montez Sweat was acquired. That was a big move.
I would agree with you. I think personnel-wise, they're moving in the right direction. Do you think that overshadows any changes or weirdness going on with quarterback and the offensive staff going into next year?
I think it's unfortunate you've got a quarterback working with yet another, it'll be his third guy in 4 years, whoever the successor is, to Luke Getsy. And I have no insight as to who that might be. I hope it's somebody who is willing to work with the talent that's in the room and not force feed his system on the guys who already are assembled. I think that's a problem a lot of young coaches in particular have. I think Ryan Poles said something really true today. The job is very appealing to a coordinator on either side, whether you're going to, if you're an offensive coordinator candidate, you got DJ Moore, you got the 1 and the 9, you have 2 decent young tackles, one who could be very good in Darnell Wright, and I think Braxton Jones has been okay. They need help in the middle. They got a good tight end. You got the 1 and the 9. That's appealing to everybody. And the defense, as much as they came on the second half, that looks good to a would-be defensive coordinator too. And again, they have draft capital and they have money in free agency.
How do you think the new OC, whoever it's going to be, is going to approach this situation? I mean, I don't think they're going to know when they're hired if it's going to be Caleb Williams or Justin Fields, et cetera. So how do you think the Bears and this offensive coordinator should approach this situation? It's really odd right now with not much clarity, as you had said earlier.
Yeah, it is. It's like, do you want the job if you're an offensive coordinator and don't know who you're going to be working with? Maybe not. And you have to do a lot of reading of tea leaves in your conversations with the management team about what its intentions are. I think those conversations probably would have to be really, really candid, and they would have to give the confidence to their top 2 or 3 guys and share with them what their plans are. And if a guy's got cold feet about a candidate, then it's the deal's off. There's no reason for them to pursue a relationship if they're not on the same page with whichever college player they like.
How similar do you think this is, Dan, to, I'm thinking maybe Phillip Rivers and the Chargers situation, Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees? I mean, you have somebody here who's played for 3 years. There's a lot of contentious debate on whether or not he's the guy. You also have the number 1 pick. I don't think he's the guy. That's just me. But, I mean, is this similar to something like that?
It's been going on since I've been watching Bears games. This is, I don't remember. There was no sports talk in 1969, the first Bears season I remember, John, and they went 1-13 that year. That's with Gale Sayers and Dick Butkus on the roster. They went 1-13. There wasn't much quarterback controversy amidst all those losses, but the Bears have never been settled at the quarterback, other than their short time when Jim McMahon was healthy in the early to mid, flirting with the late 80s. That didn't last real long. He's probably the best quarterback they had in terms of what he brought to the team as a whole. Jay Cutler was the most talented, but even near the end of, while nobody was crying for his backup, they certainly weren't pleased with Cutler. That's a Bears tradition, and the only traditions worth keeping are winning ones, in my opinion. Let's lose the bad quarterback tradition. Here's a little nugget for you. Eric Kramer, who holds the Bears passing record for yards in one season, threw for 3,838 yards. It's real easy to remember, 38. No Bears passer has exceeded that in 1 year. 7 times in Kirk Cousins' career, he has exceeded 4,000 yards. Now, we mock Kirk Cousins in Chicago on occasion. I don't think a lot of people think he's a winner. They think he's above average. They think he's not going to get you killed, but he's not going to lead you to the title. And he's had 7 seasons that are better than the best in Bears history on paper.
And I don't know, Dan, if you heard this too, but I heard a lot of mockery, even of Jordan Love this past week. He's, bad team or not that great of a game. I heard people say that, and yet Jordan Love this year, in essentially his rookie season, had 4,000-plus passing yards and 30 touchdowns. That would have been the best season in Bears quarterback history if he did that here in Chicago.
Yes, and you're right. It felt like he was a rookie. He's in his 3rd year. It's the first time he's had the team, and he looked like he knew what he was doing for the first 3 games of the year. Then he hit a little bit of the skids, weeks 4, 5, and 6. He wasn't very good, but he has recovered. He looked like a better quarterback. He was the one this past Sunday who looked like he was in his 3rd year as a starter, not Justin Fields. It was juxtaposed. He was quick to get rid of the ball. He moved well. He keeps his eyes moving. And again, I think Fields has made some marked progress, but got no touchdowns against the divisional opponent. That's not satisfactory.
Got Dan McNeil here with us on Sports Talk Chicago, host of Danny Mac's Friday Tailgate on WJOB, the Danny Mac podcast, and of course a sports radio legend. So Dan, the offseason is going to continue for the Bears in this position. What are they going to do next?
They got to find themselves a center in free agency once that opens up. I think that's one of the biggest priorities on the team. I'd like to see them add another pass rusher. I know maybe that'll come in the draft. Maybe they'll find somebody not necessarily with 1 or 9, and I think there's a real good chance, based on his short history, Ryan Poles will deal and maybe try to get some additional picks out of one of those 2 picks. They need a running back, too. I'm the only one talking about this. Khalil Herbert posted some really good numbers in weeks 16 and 17, and then they didn't do anything last week. But he's a plotter to me, and I'm not knocked out by Roschon Johnson. I know he was a rookie, but I don't know what the future of this team is at running back, and you're not going to draft a guy high at running back. I understand the era in which they're playing pro football, but I think they need to at least look for some help via free agency, maybe find a new Deontay Foreman for next year.
Why didn't they keep David Montgomery? And maybe this is antiquated and something that shouldn't be said, but I'll tell you, 2 years, $10 million is all that the Lions gave him. And he had a 1,000-yard season in Detroit splitting carries. Why didn't they keep him if they need a running back so bad now?
That's a great question. I would have paid him. I thought he was a real tough kid, and I thought he never really got an opportunity to be a showcase running back here. And the Bear, there was one of Matt Nagy's, I believe, it was the rookie year of David Montgomery when Matt Nagy they had 7 rushes and a loss to the Saints at home. That was the one that the game that prompted the "I'm not an idiot" soundbite from Matt Nagy. Montgomery just didn't get enough opportunities here. I thought he was always very tough. He's pretty durable. And he played like a guy who had something to prove this year for the Lions. He was very good. The Bears probably should have hung on to him. But in this era, they treat those guys like livestock. Running backs do not have the same rights as the other positional players.
On a side note, what do you think of Matt Nagy and his offensive performance this year in Kansas City? Oddly reminiscent of Chicago stuff, right?
Man, the Chiefs just don't look good. And I thought for a while they were just bored. I thought maybe they're just playing down to the level of competition. They've got a really good defense nobody talks about because it's all about Patrick Mahomes. And I understand that. And Taylor Swift, too. But Kansas City, I would not bet on them this postseason. I don't think I'd bet against them because Patrick Mahomes still can cut your heart out, but I certainly wouldn't put my money on them. There's only really 1 or 2 teams that I find to be really trustworthy. How about you? I mean, is there anybody other than Baltimore or San Francisco that jumps out to you and says, I'm gonna be taking a confetti shower come February?
There have been too many upsets, and there have been too many weaknesses exposed for all these other teams. I mean, look at Miami, the collapse they've had. I read a report the other day, Dan, that if Miami loses their first game of the playoffs, Mike McDaniel is going to be fired. I don't know if that's true or not, but Miami has been topsy-turvy. The Bills have turned it on late, but they were bad early on. Even the Eagles, I think, lost way too many games, and Jalen Hurts has had such a tough follow-up from last year's runner-up to the MVP finish. So, I mean, I'm with you. It doesn't seem like there's a sure thing this year in the NFL playoffs.
Yeah, the Eagles have lost 5 of their last 6 games. They don't look good at all, and Hurts has been a big part of that. They're not getting after the quarterback, and they're not tackling. Other than that, they're playing just fine. The Dolphins have to come into cold weather, too. That's going to be a problem for Miami. I've wondered if they're one of those teams that's really fun to watch when it's hot out and the sun is shining, and then when they get in a cold weather game or they get in a street fight, they may not prevail. And I think that's going to be a tough putt for Miami this weekend, which is too bad because I find them to be as entertaining as anybody offensively this year.
Got Dan McNeil still with us on Sports Talk Chicago. Dan, a few more questions before we finish up here. First off, the Friday tailgate still on WJOB. How's that been going?
Terrific. Noon to 2 on Friday afternoons, and they're nice enough to replay the show on Friday nights between 5 and 7, and then again Saturday mornings. So it's going well. We're into our 3rd year of doing this already. It's a little bit of a challenge once football season ends, but it's only a 2-hour show every week, so I think I can muscle up enough thoughtage, especially with another interesting offseason for the Bears ahead.
And what about the Danny Mac podcast, too, with Matt Eberflus? Obviously, I see your posts every week. You're recording regularly, and it seems like a lot of people are tuning in.
Yeah, I hope so. The Danny Mac podcast, it's free. Like most podcasts are, they're free. And we've been adding some guests to the mix this football season. That was something we didn't do the first year of the podcast. Now we're in year number 2. We're adding some guests to it, and we're toying with some ideas to make it interactive, John, too. Although I'd like to find a way to do that without actually just taking live phone calls, because I don't know if anybody, whether they're listening to terrestrial, your podcast, wants to hear Mike in Oak Park one more time say, yes, I think they screwed up not firing Matt Eberflus. It just doesn't add much to it, but I'd like it to be interactive in some way. Maybe we'll record some callers, some listeners who want to comment.
Let me ask you this, Dan, before we finish up, last question, and this might be a little bit outside of what we were talking about today, but if you could think of something here, what's one of your best moments that you've had in radio?
The best moments. All right, the Bulls are honoring, this is going to surprise you. I start with basketball, right? The Bulls are honoring the 72-10 team this week, right?
Yes.
That team in 95-96 finished the year with a NBA Finals victory over Seattle. And I was in Seattle with the Score. They were nice enough to send the afternoon show out there. And Dan Patrick and I had struck up a friendship for several years. And Dan Patrick and Brent Musburger, Mike Tirico, Terry Bors, my air partner, my producer, and a few behind-the-scenes big shots at ESPN, we were closing the hotel bar, and I was doing an impersonation of Chet Kopic, who they all had known. And I was still not feeling, John, like I belonged. I was 35 years old almost, but I still was not like, man, I'm hanging with these guys, and they see. I had the entire audience on the floor holding their bellies. And I'm like, wow, that's Brent Musburger. That's Dan Patrick. And Tirico wasn't huge yet in 96, but you could tell his star was on the ascent. And I'm like, wow, I belong. I went to bed that night feeling very, very good about myself and my comedic chops and inner ability to imitate Chet Kopic. It was worth something anyway.
Dan, thank you so much for joining. You certainly belong. Obviously, sports radio legend. You've been in the business 30-plus years. And for everybody tuning in, listen to the Danny Mac Friday Tailgate on WJOB, the Danny Mac podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Dan, always enjoy it, and looking forward to the next time we chat as well.
Thanks, John. I am too. Keep going strong, buddy. You're doing great.